Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this video is a little bit about redemption. So in this case, I got a viewer mail, and I think it talks more about Star Wars, certainly, than comics, although Star Wars are comics. But let's get into this. It says, Hiya, Dr. Perch, Medicine Man. By the way, I'm appreciating all of the different wacky intros. As long as you don't say I have a love for Arby's, I'm good. So anyway, this mail continues. It says, I just binged the Obi Wan show, and I'm troubled by something. The show set, and by the way, I was troubled by... I don't know, there are parts I thought were fine. There are parts I thought were boring. I was really only troubled by one thing. I mean, the continuity gaps and everything else, the more I thought about it, bothered me. But there was one thing that really stuck out in my mind as it bugged me. And as it just so happens, it's the same thing that this person writing the mail identified as bugging them. So I feel this kinship to this writer here. Let's get into it. The show sets up, I've just been to the Obi Wan show, and I'm troubled by something. The show sets up Reva as an objectively shitty person. The show basically writes her like Hans Landa from Inglourious Bastards. I would never let someone like Reva around my kids, and neither would you. I've seen people comparing Reva and Vader, saying, well, if you can accept Anakin returning to the good despite killing kids, you can accept Reva. But two important things. First, in the original trilogy, it wasn't no Vader killed kids, and even the evil in the first movie feels driven by Tarkin, not Vader. Second, Vader has a clear redemption and sacrifice arc, and it's the sacrifice that sells it. Reva simply walks away and chooses not to kill Luke. Isn't Reva now the Star Wars version of the Nazi war criminals who moved to Argentina? She spent years of her life helping hunt down and murder Jedi, supposedly to get Vader back for killing her Jedi friends. Like, this Nazi murdered my Jewish friends, so I helped him hunt down and kill more Jewish people so I could get him. I'm sorry, what? So, before we continue with the rest of the mail, that's exactly kind of my irritation with the character. Reva is shown in the beginning being fairly ruthless, chopping off people's hands, allowing people to get murdered, definitely making decisions that would basically result in the murder of innocent civilians. And then it's I was doing it because Vader killed some of my buddies. It doesn't make any sense. And by the way, I've seen people compare this to saying, well, Vader had a redemption arc in Return of the Jedi, but Vader didn't really have a redemption arc. I think redemption is, making sacrifices, doing things to make up for your past misdeeds. Vader basically realized that the past misdeeds, Anakin, that the past evil that he'd done was, horrible, knew he was going to die, or basically was willing to say, in the final moments of my life, I will try and help someone who could do more good than I was able to do. That's not redemption. It's a sacrifice, and it's certainly it's basically trying to make up for some misdeeds. But the sheer totality of everything Vader did in the movies, even the original trilogy, but certainly when you put in the prequels, that there's no way to balance those scales. So really it was I'm going to prevent myself from doing more evil. I'm going to take this one step to at least give someone else the chance to do better than me. That's sacrifice. That's putting someone before you. That's realizing the error of your ways. It's not redemption. At the end of Return of the Jedi, Vader didn't suddenly turn good, or didn't suddenly become I understand the Force ghosts and everything, which does muddle the message somewhat, but Vader has, to use if we're going to cross over to comics, use a Black Widow, has a red ledger that far exceeds, making the sacrifice for Luke. So but I don't think that was the point. The point of that movie was not, hey, Vader redeemed himself and now he's a good guy. The point was Vader made a sacrifice in order to help someone else do good. I think there's a massive difference between the two. The Reva situation just felt like sloppy, I'll bet you didn't see this coming, twist writing. It was like bad M. Night Shyamalan, the equivalent of The Happening. That was what we got out of Obi Wan. I thought that twist was self-serving. Unfortunately, and I hate it that I'm saying this, it felt a little bit like, hey, the black female character can't truly be a despicable villain in the end. We have to show a way that maybe she wasn't as villainous as we let on. she's tough, she's strong, she does evil things, but she's got a heart of gold underneath it all, and there's reasons behind that. And I think I would hope that that's not why they did what they did, but most likely it has more to do with that than the idea of actually trying to create an interesting twist. So I don't know. I was disappointed by that end. I just let villains be villains, for God's sake. It's not that hard. Anyway, let's go back to the mail real quick. It says, this is a recurring theme in modern fiction. People do what I would say are just evil things, but writers don't seem to actually know the difference between redemption and quitting. You can't just quit being a terrible person by walking away. Imagine if one day Joker just quit being a killer and Batman and Gordon were like, well, he seems to have had a real change of heart. Shall we just let him leave Gotham and start a new life? Come on. There's some bells you can't just unring. Do modern writers actually understand the idea of redemption arcs anymore? Just quitting evil isn't redemption. Performing a selfless act is. Reva never does this in the show, not once. Even Superman and Lois, Superman keeps his brother locked up despite some redemption, and he's Superman, the optimist. Superman wouldn't let Reva just walk away, is what I'm saying. Well, I mean, it depends on the writer, of course, but you're right. No, that all bugs me. All this stuff, it's poor handling of villains. And I know I've talked a lot about villains in the past and how they need to be written and kind of the lost art of writing villains. The key aspect comes to, it's okay to let characters, by the way, whoever they might be, black, white, trans, whatever you want to do, it's okay to let villains be villains. In fact, it's not just okay, it's critical that you let villains be villains. The comics need to provide good foils to the heroes. If you want to truly have an amazing hero character, you need to have a truly despicable villain that helps provide that showcase for the hero to do what they're doing. Now, that villain could be a character, it could be a situation, it could be a location, it could be an environmental thing, it could be all kinds of different things, could be that villain. But you have to have the heroes go up against something that really is able to contrast who they are. And to me, the Reva situation just, unfortunately, felt entirely like the writers really wanted to have this twist, and also that the writers got nervous that if they just had a sadistic, evil black female character, some would accuse them of being racist. I hate that that's even in my head, but that's where our current culture and society is. It's like I don't think they were going to just let that character sit as evil. They had to do something. If it wasn't going to be that, then it was going to be some, flashback that showed that a bunch of white Trump voters bullied her as a kid, and then that's how she turned out the way she did. It's okay to let any gender, any sexuality, any race be a villain, just like it's okay for any of those people to also be heroes. Everybody should be allowed to be everything, and you don't need to make you don't need to make the villains somehow less villainous based on the color of their skin or their gender. And that's what it feels like. It may not even have been that. It may just be the writers kind of hackily setting up some kind of redemption arc and wanting to say, see, the character you thought was bad wasn't actually bad. It was in this an amazing twist. But unfortunately, the way the culture has gone, it feels like it also probably is tied to all this other crap. Either way, it's not good. I think that if the Star Wars franchise is going to survive, and I'll throw this out there as a concept. Look at the new movies from Disney. The one that seems to have the best critical acclaim is Rogue One. Now, Rogue One featured absolute villainy. I mean, at the end of that movie, you had Darth Vader just murdering the shit out of people. You had a planet getting destroyed. You had sacrifice. I mean, you had some villainy, both cowardly villainy and outright villainy in that movie. If you look at the three prequels, I mean, you had, Han Solo's kid, Ben. You had Ben Solo basically as a misunderstood villain who waffled between being a true villain and not a villain. You had Snoke, who gets kind of wiped out relatively early. You get a bunch of kind of, rando Empire villains. You get God, Gwyneth Christie, you get the Game of Thrones actor at the height of Game of Thrones popularity, and you basically hide her behind a mask and then kill her in embarrassing ways. Then you finally in the last movie say, well, we give up, we're going to have Palpatine return from the grave as a clone. Like where are the villains of Star Wars? The movie that showed the most villainy was Rogue One, and that movie was the most popular. Arguably, Solo showed more villains in that than the Star Wars prequels. If you want to have an amazing, movie, you have to have an amazing villain. And I understand that Darth Vader turned out the way he did, but Darth Vader for 2.5 movies was a menacing evil threat. And then Palpatine, when he first came out, was a menacing evil threat. You've got to have not a conflicted villain, not a villain that has a chance for redemption. You just need to have a fucking villain who's going to go murder people. And if you have that and you make them a super insane threat. I mean, look, there's a reason why a lot of horror movies do really well, even though it's the same tired formula over and over and over. A lot of these horror movies are not good. Like, who really wants Scream 5? Or Friday the 13th, 12. Like, you don't need those movies, but the reason why they survive and they maintain, the reason why you have Saw movies continue to get, vomited out, is that you have a villain, you have a sadistic, evil villain, and people want to see that villain, defeated. They want to see the villain be threatening, diabolical, and then defeated. There's a reason why The Boys is doing well on Amazon Prime. Homelander is a out-of-control superhero that one day will snap and just burn down cities. That makes him threatening. It makes him dangerous. Yeah, he's got some backstory, but if they decide to spend the next 3 or 4 episodes talking about how Homelander actually is not that bad a guy and he's actually got a heart of gold, but he's hiding it because he's scared of girls or whatever it happens to be, it will cut the entire show off at its legs, at the knees. You have to do things. You have to let villains be villains. Anyway, thank you very much for the mail. I had the exact same reaction on Star Wars. Glad to see I wasn't the only one. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for listening.